All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're looking at a really fascinating and honestly pretty provocative theory from a Dr. Adam O'Brien. He's asking us to look at our immigration system in a whole new way, not just as, a bunch of policies and rules, but as a single entity, one that has its own deep-seated wounds. It's a powerful idea, and it could totally change how we even think about fixing the system. So, the whole thing really boils down to this one huge question. Can a complex, bureaucratic system, made up of laws and institutions and people, can it actually show signs of trauma, just like a person can? It sounds kind of out there, so let's break it down. And here it is. This is the core idea from the source material. It's a heavy statement, right? It frames the system not as something that's intentionally cruel, but more like something compulsively repeating a really painful cycle it just can't seem to escape. But what in the world does it mean for a system to be addicted to trauma? To even begin to wrap our heads around a concept this big, we've got to scale it way down first. So let's start by looking at how trauma works. Not in a giant system, but inside a single person. The foundation for this whole argument really comes from the groundbreaking research of Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. His work shows us something incredible, that trauma isn't just a bad memory you have. Nope, it's a physical and psychological imprint that can unconsciously drive our behavior for years and years. And that brings us to this really key concept, trauma reenactment. So what is that? It's basically this psychological principle where a person, without even realizing it, keeps recreating the circumstances of their past trauma. And this is so important. It's not a conscious choice. It's more like a compulsive, powerful drive to repeat what's familiar, even when that familiar thing is incredibly painful. So to put it simply, someone with unresolved trauma might find themselves stuck in the same kind of harmful situations or relationships over and over again. It's not because they want to be there, it's because the trauma itself is kind of running the show, which really proves that old saying, the body truly does keep the score. And here is where we make the big leap. Dr. O'Brien takes this model of an individual psychology and asks, what if an entire system could be trapped in that same kind of loop? What if our immigration policies aren't just policies, but are actually symptoms? So now we're taking that same idea and applying it to the entire immigration system. The argument, at its core, is that the system itself acts a lot like a traumatized person, compulsively reenacting patterns of harm just on a massive scale. So the claim here is that the system doesn't really learn or heal. Instead, it just gets stuck. It reenacts these historical patterns of control and abuse on new groups of vulnerable people, basically inflicting new wounds instead of ever resolving the old ones. So, what are the signs? What does this look like in practice? Well, the source material points to three major symptoms that suggest the system is caught in this destructive cycle. Let's break them down one by one.
Okay, so you have these three symptoms: re-traumatization, denial, and a punitive mindset. And they don't just exist side by side. The argument is that they actually feed each other, creating this self-perpetuating loop. So let's start with that first one.
The first symptom is that the system actively re-traumatizes people. Think about the logic here. Individuals arrive having already fled just profound trauma. We're talking violence, instability, persecution. The system then hits them with coercive policies like detention or family separation, which they don't solve anything. Instead, they inflict a new layer of trauma right on top of the old one. Symptom number 2 is systemic denial, or what the source also calls dissociation. It's this idea that the system operates with a profound disconnect from the human suffering it's actually causing. And to really get how that's even possible, we need to look at the conflicting ethics at play. And this slide just lays out the conflict at the heart of that denial perfectly. On one side, you've got what the source calls legal ethics. This is just a super rigid focus on the rules, the procedures, the laws. But in being so focused on the process, it completely tunes out the other side, the moral ethics. The stuff about compassion, human dignity, and the actual human cost of these policies. And finally, the third symptom is this constant reliance on punishment. So instead of looking at the incredibly complex root causes of migration, like economic instability or violence, the system's default setting is just to punish. The source draws a direct line from this to the war on drugs, which is another policy approach that often chooses punishment over treatment. It's described as a system that's, well, developmentally stuck. So, after looking at all these symptoms, you have to ask yourself, okay,
Why does any of this matter? Why is looking at the system through this lens even useful? What's the point of the metaphor?
And this is the crucial takeaway. This framework is not meant to be an excuse for the system's actions, not at all. It's offering a diagnosis. It's suggesting that the system's harmful and, let's be honest, often illogical behavior might not be coming from a place of simple malice, but from a deep, unresolved dysfunction.
And that is the ultimate challenge this idea presents. It's asking us to shift our whole perspective, to go from seeing a system as intentionally evil to seeing it as compulsively wounded, from focusing on bad intentions to instead analyzing broken mechanics. It completely changes the kind of problem we're trying to solve.
And that leaves us with this one last, really profound question. If we accept this metaphor, even for just a moment, that a system can be traumatized, that it can be stuck in a cycle of hurting itself and others, then the next logical question isn't just about how to reform it, it's about how to heal it. And what would that even look like?